Deep beneath the surface of the earth, hidden from the sun and sky, there exists a world unseen by most of humanity. It is a realm sculpted not by hands, but by the patient, relentless work of water on rock over countless eons. Here, time itself seems to slow down, measured in the geological heartbeat of the planet. It is a world of absolute darkness, a blackness so complete it feels tangible, a physical presence that absorbs the most powerful lights, and profound silence, broken only by the rhythmic sound of a diver's own breathing, a constant, intimate reminder of their fragile connection to life. This is a labyrinth of submerged passages, a complex network of tunnels and chambers carved out of ancient limestone over millennia. These underwater caves are some of the last truly unexplored frontiers on our planet, holding geological and biological secrets yet to be discovered. They beckon to a unique and fearless breed of explorer, individuals driven by a desire to chart the unknown. Within these depths lies breathtaking beauty, subterranean cathedrals adorned with formations that defy imagination. But this beauty is guarded by immense danger. Every turn can present a new, life-threatening challenge. Here, the line between discovery and disaster is as thin as the guideline, the diver's single most critical piece of equipment. This simple nylon cord is the only guaranteed path back to the surface. It is the lifeline that leads a diver back through the maze, back to the world of light and air. Losing the line means losing your way, a fatal error in a place with no other landmarks. The reward for accepting such risk is access to unparalleled vistas, and the profound thrill of venturing where no one has gone before, of being the first human eyes to witness a hidden corner of the earth. But the risks are absolute and unforgiving. There is no margin for error, no room for panic. The allure of these hidden chambers is powerful, a siren's call to the curious and the brave, promising sights and experiences found nowhere else on the planet. To answer that call, cave divers train for years, mastering complex equipment where redundancy is paramount. Every critical system has a backup, and a backup for the backup. They spend countless hours steeling their nerves, conditioning their minds to face conditions that would overwhelm the unprepared. They learn to navigate through impossibly tight restrictions, spaces so small they must remove equipment and push it ahead of them, all while in total darkness. They must meticulously control their breathing to conserve precious air, adhering to strict gas management rules like the rule of thirds: 1/3 of the gas supply for the way in, 1/3 for the way out, and 1/3 reserved for emergencies. And they must maintain perfect buoyancy, hovering weightlessly to avoid disturbing the fine, clay-like silt that carpets the floor. A single misplaced fin kick can obliterate visibility in an instant, creating a blinding silt-out that can take hours or even days to clear. Every dive is a calculated risk, a delicate dance with the elements, where preparation and discipline are the only partners. It is a journey into an environment that offers no second chances. It is a pursuit that demands not just physical skill and technical mastery, but an unwavering mental fortitude built on a foundation of humility and respect for the cave. The ability to solve multiple cascading problems in the dark, under pressure, while your life hangs in the balance, requires a calmness that is nothing short of extraordinary. She was one of the most fearless and accomplished cave divers in the world, a woman who felt more at home in the submerged underworld than on dry land. Agnes Malauka had dedicated her life to exploring these secret places, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible and mapping passages that had never seen the light of a human torch. Courage, skill, an insatiable passion for discovery. Intricate networks of Florida, deep, cold chasms of Europe, always returning with new knowledge and breathtaking stories. Her expertise was sought after for expeditions and film projects, including the blockbuster movie Sanctum. But on a summer day in 2011, deep beneath the rugged landscape of South Australia, Agnes Malauka embarked on a dive that would become her last. She entered a passage from which she would never return, leaving the exploration community in a state of shock and profound loss. This is the story of that final, tragic dive. The setting for this tragedy is a place known to divers around the globe simply as Tank Cave. Its name resonates within the tight-knit community of cave explorers, a name synonymous with both breathtaking beauty and extreme, unforgiving challenge. It is a place that demands absolute perfection, where the line between a successful exploration and a life-threatening incident is razor-thin. Located near Mount Gambier in South Australia, it's not just a cave, but a sprawling subterranean maze. This region, known as the Limestone Coast, is a global mecca for cave divers. Its unique karst landscape, formed over millions of years, is riddled with water-filled passages, creating a network of some of the most spectacular and dangerous underwater environments on the planet. Tank Cave is considered the crown jewel of this system, a labyrinth that has drawn the world's best explorers for decades. It is considered one of the longest and most intricate underwater cave systems on Earth, with over 7 kilometers of mapped passages and countless more still waiting to be discovered. But that number, 7 kilometers, fails to capture the true complexity. This isn't a single linear tunnel. It's a three-dimensional web of interconnected conduits, some vast enough to drive a bus through, others so tight they require a diver to remove equipment to pass. Mapping the system is a painstaking process, a slow and methodical crawl into the unknown, with explorers laying down a permanent guideline, meticulously surveying every twist and turn to build a picture of this hidden world. Its name is deceptively simple, derived from the old stock watering tank that once covered its entrance. A humble, almost comically mundane origin for a place of such profound and dangerous beauty. For years, it was just a hole in a farmer's field, a convenient water source, its incredible secrets lying just meters below the surface, completely unknown. Below this unassuming entry point lies a complex network of tunnels, chambers, and claustrophobic restrictions. The descent begins through a narrow shaft, opening up into a world devoid of natural light. From here, the cave branches out in every direction, a disorienting maze for the unprepared. That presents a formidable challenge to even the most experienced divers. The geology of Tank Cave makes it uniquely treacherous. The limestone is soft and fragile. Passages can be incredibly restrictive, forcing divers into contorted positions, their movements limited, their gear scraping against the walls. Every maneuver requires flawless buoyancy control and a calm, focused mind. The floor and walls are coated in a thick layer of fine, dark silt, a sediment so light that the slightest disturbance, a misplaced fin kick, the exhalation of bubbles, can instantly turn crystal-clear water into an impenetrable black fog. This sediment, a mixture of clay and decomposed organic matter, has the consistency of talcum powder. It hangs suspended in the water column, refusing to settle, creating a condition of zero visibility that can persist for hours, even days. This phenomenon, known as a silt-out, is one of a cave diver's greatest fears. It can cause complete disorientation, stripping away a diver's most crucial sense: sight. In an instant, the entire world vanishes. The powerful dive lights become useless, their beams swallowed by the swirling darkness. Panic can set in as the diver is plunged into a sensory deprivation nightmare, alone in the cold and the black, making it impossible to see gauges, equipment, or the guideline that serves as the only lifeline back to the surface, the world above. In a silt-out, a diver must rely solely on tactile sense and unwavering discipline, their hands searching blindly for that thin nylon rope, the one and only connection to a known route out. Losing contact with the line is often a death sentence. For explorers like Agnes Maloka, Tank Cave was an irresistible puzzle. It wasn't the danger that drew her in, but the profound challenge and the promise of discovery. She possessed the rare combination of physical skill, mental fortitude, and an insatiable curiosity required to safely navigate such an environment. She understood the risks intimately and had dedicated her life to mastering the techniques needed to mitigate them. It was a place where a small, unexplored side passage could lead to a massive new section of the cave system, a breakthrough that would add another chapter to the story of this incredible place. This is the siren song of cave exploration, the chance to be the first human being to ever lay eyes on a passage, to push the boundaries of the known world, and to leave a permanent mark on the map for others to follow. On February 27, 2011, Agnes and a dive partner descended into the familiar darkness of Tank Cave. The dive plan was to explore a specific area, a section known for its tight passages and silty conditions. They were both highly experienced, equipped with state-of-the-art rebreathers, and following established protocols. The objective was clear: to survey a known line and potentially investigate promising leads for future exploration, pushing a little further into the unknown as she had done countless times before. The conditions were typical for the system: tight, silty, and demanding. Visibility was good, but the potential for a silt-out was ever present. This was business as usual for Agnes, an environment where she was supremely comfortable, her movements precise and efficient, her mind calm and analytical. But something on this dive would go terribly wrong. A decision to enter a small offshoot tunnel, a passage that was not part of the original dive plan, would change everything. This deviation from the plan, a common practice in exploration when a promising lead appears, is a calculated risk. The explorer weighs the potential for discovery against the immediate environmental threats. A choice made in the spirit of exploration that defined her very being would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to a desperate, silent struggle deep within the earth. Inside this narrow restriction, far from the main guideline, the delicate balance she had mastered throughout her career was irrevocably broken. The fine silt, disturbed in the tight confines, would have quickly and completely erased all visibility. The very passion that drove her to explore the world's darkest corners would ultimately lead her into a passage with no exit. Trapped, disoriented, and with a finite supply of breathing gas, she was faced with the one scenario every cave diver trains for, but prays they never encounter. The cave that had given her so much purpose had become a trap, its silent ancient walls bearing witness to the final moments of one of the world's most gifted explorers. The morning of Sunday, February 27, 2011, dawned cool and clear over Mount Gambier. In this quiet corner of South Australia, the landscape, scarred by ancient volcanoes, hides a secret world beneath its surface. A labyrinth of limestone caves flooded with water of astonishing clarity. For the global cave diving community, this region is a pilgrimage site, and for those who gathered at the entrance to Tank Cave, it was a day for exploration. The mood was one of focused anticipation, a familiar blend of camaraderie and meticulous preparation that precedes any serious cave dive. Among them was Agnes Malowka, a diver whose name was synonymous with pushing the boundaries of underwater exploration. Agnes and her dive partner prepared their gear with the practiced efficiency of seasoned explorers. They were using state-of-the-art closed-circuit rebreathers, or CCRs. These are not your typical scuba tanks. A rebreather is a complex life support system that recycles a diver's exhaled breath. Instead of venting bubbles into the water, it directs the gas into a loop where a chemical scrubber removes the carbon dioxide. Oxygen sensors then analyze the remaining gas, and a computer injects a precise amount of oxygen to maintain a breathable mix. The benefits are transformative for cave exploration. Dives can last for many hours, far beyond the limits of conventional scuba, and critically, they produce almost no bubbles. In caves with ceilings coated in fine, volatile silt, exhaled bubbles can trigger a blinding underwater avalanche. For Agnes, the rebreather was an essential key, unlocking deeper and more remote passages. But this advanced technology demands an equally advanced level of training, discipline, and an intimate understanding of its mechanics. Their plan for the day was ambitious: to descend into Tank Cave and continue exploring a new section, pushing a line into the unknown. As they submerged, the familiar world vanished. The warmth of the sun, the sounds of the surface, the very air itself, all were left behind. They were replaced by the profound, enveloping quiet of the cave and the steady, rhythmic pulse of their own breathing, amplified within their rebreather loops. The water temperature dropped, a constant chill that their dry suits held at bay. Their world shrank to the piercing beams of their dive lights, cutting cones of white through the darkness. Immediately upon entering the overhead environment, they connected with the main guideline, a permanent nylon rope that serves as the cave's primary highway. In cave diving, the line is everything. It is the only guaranteed path back to the surface. Losing the line is the single most dangerous event that can occur. Divers maintain constant contact, either physically or by staying within arm's reach, following it with unwavering discipline. They followed this lifeline for a significant distance, their movements precise and controlled to conserve energy and gas. Their destination was a junction known as the Sea Run, a branch off the main, well-traveled route. This area was known to be a complex maze of smaller tunnels, a place where the cave's geology became more intricate and challenging. It was less traveled, a frontier within a known system. But their objective lay even deeper within this section. The specific target for the day's exploration was a small, unmapped side tunnel, a tight offshoot from a known passage that Agnes had previously identified. This was the very edge of the map. This passage was a major restriction, a section of cave so narrow that a diver cannot swim through with their gear mounted on their back. They must remove their tanks, push them ahead, and squeeze their body through the tightest sections. For many, such tight spots are terrifying dead ends, absolute barriers to exploration. But for Agnes, they were invitations. They were the gateways to Virgin Cave, places no human had ever seen. Her unique skill and slender build made her exceptionally adept at navigating these challenging spaces. The plan was carefully orchestrated, following established protocols. Agnes would be the push diver. She secured a thin, new exploration line from her reel to the permanent guideline, creating a new branch on the cave's map. This new line would be her only connection back to this point. Her partner would not follow her into the restriction. He would remain here, in the larger, safer passage, acting as a safety anchor. His role was to monitor the time, manage his own gas supply, and be ready to provide immediate support should Agnes return with a problem. With her rebreather unclipped and pushed ahead, Agnes began to negotiate the entrance. With her primary light probing the absolute darkness of the new passage, she carefully entered the tight opening, her body contorting to fit the shape of the rock. The reel in her hand paid out the thin white line behind her, a fragile thread connecting her to the known world. Inside, the environment changed instantly. Conditions were immediately more hazardous. This virgin tunnel was coated in a thick, fluffy, dark silt, fine sediment that had settled undisturbed for millennia. This is the cave diver's greatest foe. It has the consistency of talcum powder and hangs in the water with near-neutral buoyancy. The slightest touch can explode it into a blinding cloud. Agnes was a master of buoyancy and trim, moving with minimal contact. But in such a confined space, some disturbance is almost inevitable. A fin kick too close to the floor, an elbow brushing a wall, even the gentle movement of water displaced by her body. Each tiny contact added a small puff of sediment to the water. As she progressed deeper into the restriction, the cumulative effect of these minor disturbances began to grow. Then, it happened. What started as a minor haze in her wake quickly became a thick, soupy fog, a complete and total silt-out. Visibility dropped from several meters to absolute zero in a matter of seconds. Her powerful dive light, once a tool for revealing the cave's beauty, was now useless, its beam scattering back at her as if hitting a solid wall. She was plunged into a tactile, featureless blackness, more absolute than any night on the surface. Her extensive training would have kicked in instantly. Stop, breathe, think, act. The procedure is to halt all movement to avoid worsening the silt-out, remain calm, and find the guideline. But while attempting to reverse her path in total darkness, pushing her equipment back through the tight passage, Agnes appears to have lost contact with her guideline. Perhaps the line, which has some natural slack, was pushed into a crevice, or she became disoriented while maneuvering. The exact moment is unknown, but the consequence was catastrophic. Once separated from the guideline, Agnes was truly lost. In the featureless, tactile darkness of a complete silt-out, every direction feels the same. There is no up or down, no left or right. The only sensory input is the cold, confining rock and the thick, soupy water. To be lost in a cave is terrifying. To be lost in a silted-out restriction is one of the most dire situations a diver can face. The psychological pressure in such a situation is immense. The instinct to struggle, to swim frantically in search of the line, is overwhelming but fatal. It only worsens the silt-out and consumes precious gas. The sound of one's own breathing, the gentle hiss of the rebreather, becomes a stark, ticking clock, a reminder of a finite resource in a place where time is the most valuable commodity. Outside, her partner watched as the entrance to the restriction began to bleed a thick cloud of silt. He waited, knowing the protocol. But as the minutes ticked by, far longer than the agreed-upon time, concern turned to dread. Following one of the most rigid safety rules in cave diving, that a second diver should never enter a zero-visibility restriction to attempt a rescue, as it would likely trap them both, he made the agonizing but correct decision to surface and raise the alarm. Meanwhile, trapped inside the passage, Agnes was engaged in a desperate, silent battle for survival. It is believed she attempted to switch to her emergency bailout gas supply, a standard procedure. But performing complex tasks in a tight space, under extreme stress, and in total blackness, is nearly impossible. The window of opportunity for self-rescue, finding the line before disorientation and gas consumption became critical, was closing with every passing second, with every breath. The very walls of the cave she loved to explore, the unknown places she sought with such passion, had become her prison. In the silent, cold depths of Tank Cave, surrounded by the ancient, unforgiving rock, Agnes Maloka had passed the point of no return. On the surface, the initial calm of the day began to fray. When Agnes's dive partner emerged from the water alone, a feeling of deep unease settled over the small group. The group waited, their eyes fixed on the placid surface of the water, praying for the sight of bubbles. As the minutes ticked by, hope began to fade. The call for assistance was made. The cave diving community in Mount Gambier is small, tight-knit, and exceptionally well organized for exactly these kinds of emergencies. The grim reality set in. Given the time that had elapsed, the chances of finding Agnes alive were virtually zero. The mission's objective shifted to bringing her home. The recovery operation began as evening fell. The first team of highly experienced search divers descended into Tank Cave. The mission now entered its most dangerous phase. Visibility was non-existent. The search was conducted entirely by feel. After a tense and difficult search, the diver's hand made contact. It was not the guideline he found, but Agnes. The recovery diver confirmed the discovery and began the delicate and emotionally wrenching process of bringing her back. The news of the discovery sent a shockwave through the global diving community. Agnes Maloka, the vibrant, fearless, and seemingly invincible explorer, was gone. As the initial grief subsided, it was replaced by a collective determination to ensure her legacy would be one of inspiration, not just caution. Agnes was more than just an adventurer. She was a pioneer whose life's work, captured in maps, films, and writings, became a lasting testament to her spirit. The detailed and accurate maps she created remain in use, guiding explorers safely through passages she was the first to chart. She was a role model, particularly for a new generation of female explorers, proving that courage, skill, and determination know no gender. Agnes Maloka lived for discovery, and while her final dive ended in tragedy, her courage continues to fuel the ambitions of those who follow in her wake. To formally honor her immense contributions, the Agnes Maloka Memorial Environmental Science Award was established. This prestigious grant seeks to keep her spirit of discovery alive by supporting meaningful research projects related to the underwater environment. It empowers the next generation of explorers and scientists to undertake ambitious projects, fostering new discoveries in her name. Her story has become a cornerstone of modern diving lore, a solemn, cautionary tale that has contributed to making a dangerous pursuit safer for all who follow. The story of Agnes Maloka is a powerful and poignant narrative that encapsulates the very essence of exploration. It underscores the dual truth that has always defined humanity's greatest adventures: that the pursuit of discovery often walks hand in hand with immense risk. It is a narrative that balances the thrill of discovery with the weight of consequence, leaving us with a profound respect for both the explorers and the formidable environments they dare to enter. In the silent depths of Tank Cave, her spirit remains, a reminder that the pursuit of discovery often walks hand in hand with danger.
Some stories live in the dark, born in the deep, silent places of the world, far from the light of the sun. These are not just tales of fiction, they are echoes of real human experience, amplified by our most primal fears. For as long as we have ventured into the unknown, we have brought back stories of what we found there, tales of wonder, of discovery, and of profound, unforgiving danger. The subterranean world, one of the last true frontiers on our own planet, has always been a powerful source of this lore. It is a realm of breathtaking beauty and absolute indifference, a place where the normal rules of our surface world simply cease to apply. Down there, in the crushing silence and the perfect black, the line between a cautionary tale and a terrifying reality can become perilously thin. For generations, these stories were passed from one explorer to another in hushed tones, shared around a campfire, or in the quiet moments before a descent. They were part of an oral tradition, a vital library of unwritten knowledge within the tight-knit caving community. But in the modern era, the darkness has found a new medium. These stories now flicker across internet forums late at night. They mutate and spread through comment sections and social media posts, often stripped of their original context and nuance. A warning shared between experts can become a ghost story for the masses, a piece of digital folklore that takes on a life of its own. This is the new frontier of myth-making, where anonymous accounts can cement a legend in the public consciousness, regardless of its connection to documented fact. At their core, however, these are tales of caution. They are stark reminders of the unforgiving nature of the world beneath our feet, where a single miscalculation, a moment of overconfidence, or a simple turn of bad luck can lead to irreversible consequences. For decades, one such story has echoed louder than most in the digital and physical corridors of the caving community. It is a chilling, visceral account of a man trapped deep within the earth, held fast by millions of tons of rock. It is a legend that has haunted seasoned explorers and captivated armchair adventurers for generations, a narrative so powerful it feels as though it must be true. This is the story of William Coughlin, a story that is one of great tragedy. Before we jump in, if you are enjoying this video, please make sure to subscribe to see more true exploration and tragedy videos. As the legend goes, it begins with a descent into a place from which there was no confirmed return. A journey into the heart of the earth that would become a permanent, cautionary fixture in caving lore. But before we follow that descent, we must be very clear from the beginning. The search for the real William Coughlin begins not in a cave, but in the archives. And it is there that the story immediately becomes complicated. The events you are about to hear are not found in any official records. Despite extensive searches by numerous researchers and enthusiasts over the years, the narrative exists almost entirely as anecdotal evidence, a ghost in the machine of the internet. No official rescue logs from any state or federal agency confirm the massive, multi-day struggle that the legend describes. No state or national caving registry, the very organizations dedicated to documenting such tragedies to prevent future ones, contains any report of this accident. And perhaps most tellingly, no verifiable obituary, death certificate, or public record links the name William Coughlin to a death in any cave, anywhere. The man at the center of the story is officially a phantom, yet the story persists. It survives and it spreads because it doesn't need to be factually true to feel real. It speaks directly to a primal, deeply embedded human fear. The fear of being trapped, of being helpless, immobilized, and utterly alone in the dark. It is the horror of confinement, of the walls literally closing in, a nightmare scenario that requires no embellishment. So, why investigate a ghost story? Because within this legend, whether it describes a real event or not, are critical truths about the genuine dangers of cave exploration. This video will explore the enduring power of the legend, the frustrating search for its source, and most importantly, the vital, life-saving warnings hidden inside its dark and unverified narrative. It is a story about a man who may never have existed, but whose tale could one day save the life of someone who does. Every legend needs a location, a place where the chilling events are said to have unfolded. For the story of William Coughlin, that place is Buzzard's Roost Cave in Kentucky. This is a real cave system. You can find it on a map, a documented network carved into the state's limestone bedrock. But here, the connection to verifiable truth ends. There is no confirmed official report connecting Buzzard's Roost Cave to the alleged death. The cave is real, but its role as Coughlin's tomb exists only within the legend. However, the cave possesses the exact features that make the legend so believable. It has tight squeezes and difficult vertical drops. It contains passages that twist and turn, creating disorienting mazes for the unprepared. The legend simply takes these real dangers and weaves them into a single tragic narrative, set within the very real passages of Buzzard's Roost Cave. A story is only as compelling as its protagonist. In this legend, that figure is William Coughlin. But who was he? According to these accounts, William Coughlin was a large man, tall, with a broad chest and shoulders. The legend also portrays him as being relatively new to this specific type of caving, tight passage crawling. He was exploring with a small group, but his inexperience, combined with his size, would allegedly prove to be a fatal disadvantage. It is a classic narrative setup, a man whose physical trait puts him at odds with his environment. The description of Coughlin as a large man immediately creates a sense of impending doom. It is crucial to reinforce that these details are part of the myth. They are narrative elements that make the story more dramatic and its lesson more potent. As the legend goes, Coughlin and his team began their descent, unaware they were walking into a story that would be told for decades to come. Deep inside the cave, the group allegedly arrived at a feature that would become the centerpiece of the tragedy, a narrow vertical chute known in the retellings as the corkscrew. According to the legend, he decided to proceed, underestimating the chute's unforgiving geometry. He positioned himself to enter feet first, the rock walls pressed in, a constant, firm pressure. Then, the critical event occurred. He slipped. In that instant, gravity became his enemy. He dropped, jamming his body deeper into the narrowing funnel of the passage. The physics of the situation were brutal and unforgiving. A human body, especially one descending feet first into a V-shaped constriction, becomes a self-tightening wedge. Every slight downward movement, every desperate attempt to find a foothold that wasn't there, only served to lock him more securely into the stone. The friction generated by his clothing and skin against the rough limestone walls was immense, transforming the passage from a path into a prison. He was wedged tight. The fall had driven his body into a section narrower than his chest and shoulders. This is a classic and terrifying caving scenario known as a vertical squeeze. Unlike a horizontal crawl where a caver can often reverse their movement, a vertical wedge uses the person's own weight against them. To escape, one must move upward, fighting both gravity and the ever-increasing friction. For Coughlin, trapped and with his arms lightly pinned above his head, any independent movement was now impossible. He was completely at the mercy of the rock. To make matters worse, some versions of the story claim a loose rock shifted, settling against his ribcage and adding a point of focused, agonizing pressure. If true, this single event would have dramatically escalated the danger. It's no longer just a matter of being stuck, it's an active injury risk. This focal point of pressure would not only cause intense pain, but also create a new pivot point, complicating any attempt to pull him straight up and potentially causing severe internal damage. The cave was no longer a passive obstacle, it was now an active source of injury. The carefree mood of exploration vanished. Coughlin, stuck fast in the rock, was now completely helpless. Above him, his friends would have heard the sickening scrape, the muffled cry, and then a terrifying silence. Their calls would echo back, perhaps answered by a strained voice confirming their worst fears. In that moment, the adventure was over. A life-or-death crisis had begun, deep beneath the earth, far from any immediate help. His companion's immediate instinct was to pull him out. It's the most human reaction imaginable. See a friend in trouble, and apply force to solve the problem. They would have quickly lowered a rope, instructing him to hold on, or perhaps trying to fashion a crude harness. For hours, according to the legend, the struggle continued. But they were fighting against the immense power of friction. Every attempt to free him failed. They were pulling a human body against the unyielding grip of tons of rock. Without a mechanical advantage, they were simply not strong enough. Worse, their efforts may have been counterproductive, potentially pulling him tighter into the wedge or causing further injury. The grim realization would have slowly dawned on them. Their strength was useless here. The immense pressure on his chest would have made breathing increasingly difficult. This condition, known as positional asphyxia, is a grave danger in entrapment scenarios. With every breath, his chest would have to fight against the external pressure of the rock. Inhaling would be a monumental effort. Exhaling might cause him to sink infinitesimally deeper, tightening the squeeze. His body would be starved of oxygen, leading to confusion, panic, and eventual loss of consciousness. Time was rapidly running out. Realizing they could not free him, one of them had to make the agonizing journey back out of the cave to summon help. This decision is a heavy one. It means leaving a friend behind in the most terrifying circumstances imaginable. The caver chosen for this task would have to navigate the complex passages they had just explored, but this time with a desperate urgency, their mind racing, every shadow a new obstacle, every minute lost a minute closer to tragedy. This part of the legend, the long wait in the dark, is perhaps the most chilling. He was left alone with the cold, the pressure, and the crushing weight of the earth. Hypothermia would begin to set in, the constant contact with the cold, rock-leaching warmth from his body. His companion, if one stayed, could offer little more than words of comfort, a voice against the profound silence of the deep earth, a fragile human connection in a place of geological indifference. The call for help finally reached the surface. Volunteers, experienced cavers from a rescue unit, converged on the site. This is where the legend intersects with the reality of cave rescue operations. These are not ordinary emergency responders. They are specialists who train for exactly this kind of low-frequency, high-risk event. They understand the unique environment and possess the specialized equipment and knowledge required to operate safely and effectively hundreds of feet underground. Again, we must emphasize, these events are not documented. This dramatic rescue is drawn entirely from the unverified legend. But if it did happen, the rescuers' approach would have been methodical and precise. Their first priority would be to establish communication and assess the victim's medical condition. They would then analyze the physics of the entrapment. A simple pull is out of the question. The solution lies in mechanical advantage. According to the story, rescuers reached him and began rigging a sophisticated haul system, their only hope of overcoming the friction. This involves creating a system of pulleys and ropes that multiplies the force exerted by the haul team. A 3-to-1 or even a 5-to-1 system can turn a few hundred pounds of pulling force into the 1,000+ pounds needed to overcome the grip of the rock. But this takes time. Anchors must be drilled and set into solid rock. Ropes must be meticulously arranged, and a harness must be securely fitted to the victim, a task made incredibly difficult by the tight confines. After what must have felt like an eternity, they broke the unyielding grip of the earth. He was freed from the narrowest section. The haul team, pulling in unison on the command of a rigging master, would have felt the rope go taut, stretch, and then, with a sudden grinding release, the victim would begin to move. Inch by agonizing inch, he would be drawn upward, out of the stone jaws that held him. But the rescue is not over when the victim is free. In many ways, it has just begun. The journey out of the cave, packaging the patient in a specialized stretcher and maneuvering them through tight passages and vertical drops, is another monumental effort, a final race against time and the unforgiving environment of the cave. The moment William Coughlin was freed from the stone's grip was not the end of the ordeal. It was merely the beginning of a new, desperate race against time. The rescue was far from over. He was no longer just a trapped caver. He was now a critically injured patient, packaged and immobilized, deep inside one of the most hostile environments imaginable for medical care. On the surface, a paramedic has access to a sterile, well-lit ambulance with a full suite of tools. Here, the rescuers had only what they could carry on their backs, working in the cold, the mud, and the dark. Their first priority, even before beginning the arduous journey out, would have been a rapid medical assessment. They would be looking for the immediate, life-threatening consequences of being crushed for so many hours. The patient is out of the rock, but the clock on his survival is ticking faster than ever. The final ascent was a brutal, hand-over-hand, inch-by-inch process. Every obstacle that was a minor nuisance on the way in, a tight bend, a low ceiling, a short vertical drop, became a monumental challenge for the team and their awkward, heavy load. The Stokes basket, the rigid litter designed to protect the patient, is unforgiving in tight spaces. It cannot bend or flex. It must be lifted, slid, and angled with precision, a painstaking choreography performed by a weary team. They would have employed mechanical advantage systems, pulleys and ropes, to haul the litter up vertical sections, with every pull coordinated and deliberate. Communication would be a constant chain of commands and confirmations, echoing through the passages, ensuring no sudden jolts or drops could worsen the patient's condition. It's a physically draining and mentally exhausting task, where one wrong move could be catastrophic. After many more grueling hours, a new light appeared at the end of the tunnel, not a headlamp, but the cold blue-white flash of emergency beacons. They had reached the surface. William Coughlin, according to the legend, was successfully extracted. He was alive. The transition from the profound subterranean blackness to the chaotic energy of the surface rescue site is a moment of stark contrast. The air is fresh, the space is open, and a new team of medical professionals is ready to take over. He was rushed to a hospital, a journey filled with its own quiet tension. In most stories of survival, this would be the triumphant end, a hard-won victory against the odds, a testament to human endurance and the skill of the rescuers. But the legend of William Coughlin takes one final, tragic turn, reminding us that the most severe dangers of a crush injury often manifest long after the pressure has been released. According to the final chapter of this unverified tale, William Coughlin died the following day in the hospital. The story claims his body, which had fought so hard for survival, ultimately succumbed to the invisible wounds inflicted deep within the cave. Medically, this tragic outcome is entirely plausible, and it points to a terrifying condition known as crush syndrome. When parts of the body are under immense pressure for a prolonged period, muscle cells begin to die and break down, a process called rhabdomyolysis. These dying cells release a flood of toxic substances into the trapped tissues, including a protein called myoglobin. As long as the pressure is maintained, these toxins are contained. But the moment the pressure is released, the moment of rescue, is also the moment of greatest danger. This is called reperfusion injury. The restored blood flow carries that toxic cocktail throughout the body. The cause of death, as the story claims, was severe internal damage sustained during the prolonged period of compression. The flood of myoglobin from his crushed legs would have overwhelmed his kidneys, leading to acute kidney failure. The massive release of potassium from the damaged cells could have triggered a fatal cardiac arrhythmia, stopping his heart with little warning. His lungs, too, may have been compromised, filling with fluid in response to the systemic shock. Even with the best hospital care, reversing the cascade of organ failure initiated by crush syndrome is an uphill battle. The very act of freeing him, the victory itself, is what allegedly sealed his fate. Now, we must state this with absolute clarity. This part of the story, like all the others, is legend. There are no official records, no death certificates, no hospital admission forms, no news reports that confirm a man named William Coughlin was hospitalized or died from a cave-related incident in this manner. We searched archives and official databases extensively. The name, the event, the tragic outcome. They exist only in the realm of folklore. Yet, the persistence of this ending is what gives the legend its power. This final unverified act ensures the story ends not with a celebration of human resilience, but with a somber meditation on human fragility. It serves as a chilling cautionary tale. It warns that the dangers of the underground don't always end when you see the sky. The cave, the legend warns, can reach out and claim you, even after you think you've escaped. The cave always wins. The story's power lies in its chilling echoes of real tragedies. The most famous is the 2009 death of John Edward Jones in Nutty Putty Cave. After 27 hours, a massive rescue effort was unable to free him. The horrifying real-life validation of the fears in the Coughlin legend. And that is why this story matters. It has become a masterclass in caving safety, a curriculum of what not to do. It teaches us to know our limits, to respect the environment, to never explore alone, and to seek proper training. Some stories survive not because they're confirmed history, but because they embody the dangers and the allure of exploration. They are a constant, chilling reminder that when you enter the world beneath the world, you must do so with respect, preparation, and humility. Legend or not, the story of William Coughlin remains a chilling reminder. Caves do not forgive mistakes.
The date was May 28, 1973. It happened in the quiet farmlands of South Australia, near the town of Mount Gambier. A small group of friends prepared for an adventure. They were scuba divers, drawn to the region's unique geology. The area was a limestone landscape, dotted with water-filled sinkholes. For divers, these were portals to another world. The water was crystal clear. They opened into monumental chambers. It was silent, untouched beauty. One sinkhole stood out, the shaft. A thrilling technical dive, a challenge they felt ready for. Their plan seemed straightforward. They would descend into the sinkhole, then explore the vast main chamber and return to the surface before their air ran low. The group consisted of 4 members: Stephen L. Millett, Christine M. Millett, Gordon G. Roberts, and John H. Bockerman, part of a larger expedition. These 4 would dive together. They checked their regulators, strapped on heavy steel tanks. They walked to the sinkhole's tiny 1-meter opening. This was cave diving in extreme danger. Below the surface, the rules change completely. There is no quick escape to the air above. The only way out is the way you came in. Twisting, submerged passages. Darkness broken only by a fragile beam of light. Getting lost is not an inconvenience. It is a death sentence. Every decision hundreds of feet down carries immense weight. The 4 slipped one by one through the narrow opening and disappeared into the water. Friends on the surface waited and watched the clock. Minutes became an hour, then longer. A dreadful silence settled. The bubbles stopped rising. The 4 who entered the shaft did not come back. A routine weekend dive turned into a desperate puzzle and a complex, tragic recovery. What happened inside that dark, watery tomb? Want the full truth? Tap to subscribe now and get gripping exploration stories every week. The Mount Gambier region is a magnet for explorers. The surface a quilt of rolling paddocks, the ground beneath a labyrinth shaped by water and time. Here, limestone rules the landscape. Over millennia, slightly acidic rain has seeped through this porous rock, dissolving, widening, and stitching together a vast network of caves, tunnels, and caverns. When a chamber roof collapsed, a sinkhole was born, one of many natural wells puncturing the earth, some filled with water of astonishing clarity. Among them, the shaft held a special mystique. On bright days, a single beam of sunlight spears the surface opening and plunges into darkness below, turning the main chamber into a natural stage. Scale completes the spell. The primary cavern measures approximately 140 meters long and 80 meters wide, an immense bell-shaped room where light and distance play tricks on the mind. In the early 1970s, this frontier was only beginning to open. A new breed of adventurer, armed with scuba gear and curiosity, arrived to test boundaries once thought unreachable. They came for the ethereal vision, the spotlight beam, the cathedral silence, the sense of floating in a world frozen in geological time. Yet the beauty masks an unforgiving danger. Some tunnels in the shaft descend to over 120 meters, depths that magnify every mistake. At such depths, the gas a diver breathes becomes part of the hazard. Nitrogen narcosis, sometimes called the rapture of the deep, blurs judgment, slows thought, and erodes fine motor control. Euphoria can feel like confidence. In caves, that illusion is costly. Decisions that must be precise become dangerously approximate. Still, the draw was irresistible. An ultimate dive, a place of profound beauty and significant technical challenge, where skill and restraint mattered as much as bravery. The lesson, even then, was clear for those who noticed it. The deeper the temptation, the narrower the margin. Guidelines, gas discipline, and conservative plans are not optional in a place like this. And yet, in May of 1973, the allure of the shaft, its light, its silence, its vastness, would draw 4 divers into a story whose consequences reshaped the sport. The group that gathered at the shaft on that fateful May morning was bound by a shared passion for underwater exploration. At its heart was Stephen L. Millott, 30, Christine M. Millott, 26. Stephen was a respected and experienced diver from Adelaide. Known for his methodical approach and his deep fascination with South Australia's submerged cave systems, He had logged hundreds of hours underwater and was a prominent figure in the local diving community. Christine shared his adventurous spirit, often joining him on expeditions. Together, they formed a dedicated team drawn to the silent, otherworldly beauty beneath the Earth's surface. They were not reckless thrill seekers. They were serious hobbyists, captivated by a challenging and rewarding pursuit. Joining the Milots were Gordon G. Roberts, 28, John H. Bockerman, 32. Roberts, an engineer by trade, was a seasoned diver who explored the region's complex sinkholes. He was known for his calm demeanor and technical competence. Bockerman, a schoolteacher, was equally enthusiastic, though slightly less experienced in extreme caves. He was eager to push his boundaries and tackle the shaft. The four represented a cross-section of the burgeoning Australian diving scene. Professionals, passionate amateurs. Their friendship extended beyond the water's edge. They were part of a close-knit community, spending weekends traveling to remote locations, sharing knowledge, planning their next subterranean adventure. This camaraderie was essential. Cave diving demands absolute trust in your partners. Your life is quite literally in their hands, and theirs is in yours. The bond between these four was built on mutual reliance and a collective dream of exploring vast, uncharted underwater passages. Their expedition to the shaft was the culmination of shared ambition, a goal they had discussed and looked forward to for some time. On that day, they were part of a larger party of 10 divers from Adelaide. Some members were designated for support. Others planned less ambitious dives. The team of 4, Stephen, Christine, Gordon, and John, were set to tackle the main event. They were considered the most capable and prepared for the dive's primary objective: to explore the majestic main chamber of the shaft. Their experience gave them a sense of confidence. But the line between confidence and overconfidence is dangerously thin. They believed they were ready and prepared for known challenges. Yet they were tragically unaware of how quickly the situation could unravel. In the early 1970s, the Mount Gambier region was the undisputed epicenter of Australian cave diving. It was a wild frontier, attracting divers with its unparalleled density of world-class sites. Picaninny Ponds, with its chasm of filtered seawater, Ewan's Ponds, a series of crystal-clear springs, but for the more technically minded, the deeper, darker caves held the greatest appeal. These sites offered a raw, unfiltered form of exploration. The culture was one of discovery and bravado, divers often competing to see who could go deeper or explore a new passage further. It was a thrilling but hazardous era. This period is often referred to as the pioneering days of cave diving. Formal training agencies with standardized safety protocols had not yet been firmly established. Knowledge was passed down from diver to diver, often through an informal system of mentorship. Techniques were learned through trial and error, a process that carried immense risk. Divers were pushing the limits of their equipment and their own physiological endurance. The period between 1970 and 1974 was particularly grim. It was marked by a string of fatalities in the region's sinkholes, as the sport's popularity outpaced safety measures. The atmosphere among the diving community was one of immense freedom and self-reliance. There were few rules and even fewer restrictions. If you had the gear and the nerve, you could attempt almost any dive. This lack of regulation fostered a spirit of adventure, but it also created a dangerous environment where inexperience could have fatal consequences. Divers often ventured into complex overhead environments with little more than open water skills, guideline use, gas management for deep dives, emergency procedures. Despite the known risks, the allure of Mount Gambier's caves was irresistible. The shaft was a crown jewel, a sight spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. It was a rite of passage for serious divers. Successfully navigating its depths was a badge of honor. The 4 divers who perished were products of this very culture. They were daring, competent, and deeply embedded in a community that celebrated pushing boundaries. They approached the shaft with the confidence of their peers, ready to add their names to the short list of those who had witnessed its subterranean splendor and returned to tell the tale. Section 3. The Anatomy of a Killer Cave. The shaft is a geological marvel, but its unique structure makes it exceptionally treacherous. From the surface, it looks deceptively simple, a narrow man-made hole about 1 meter in diameter in a farmer's field. This tight restriction is the only way in and the only way out. Divers must descend one at a time through this tube for roughly 7 meters. Then the cave opens up dramatically. Divers emerge into a colossal bell-shaped chamber, where their lights often don't reach the far walls. The main chamber measures roughly 140 meters by 80 meters. Its ceiling is a gently sloping dome of rock. The volume is disorienting. In gin-clear water, divers feel like they're floating in an endless void with few visual references. This is the first major danger: spatial disorientation. Without a continuous guideline, finding the small exit hole in the dark ceiling is like finding a needle in a haystack, especially if visibility is compromised, or if a diver is suffering from narcosis. At the bottom, around 36 meters deep, lies a massive chaotic rock pile from a ceiling collapse. From the rock pile's edges, darker tunnels lead deeper into the system. One known tunnel plunges to about 124 meters. That extreme depth is the second major hazard. It exponentially increases air consumption. It shortens no decompression limits. It guarantees the onset of severe nitrogen narcosis. Narcosis can impair a diver's judgment. It can damage their reasoning. It can wreck their motor skills when it matters most. The cave's final deadly feature is the risk of siltouts. The floor and tunnels are coated in fine silt and clay. A misplaced fin kick can stir it. A hand brushing the floor can stir it. Exhaust bubbles from a regulator can stir it. In seconds, perfect visibility drops to 0 in a blinding cloud. A diver who loses their guideline in a siltout is blindfolded in a maze. A single tiny exit, a vast disorienting main chamber, extreme depth, and the risk of siltouts together make the shaft unforgivingly complex. Section 5. The final plan. A fatal underestimation. The plan for the dive on May 28, 1973, was ambitious in the divers' minds, ambitious but achievable. Their primary goal was to descend into the shaft and explore the vast main chamber, and eventually drop down to the rock pile at the bottom depth, 36 meters, 120 feet. Swim the perimeter and truly take in the chamber's immense scale. Their plan hinged on the shaft of light from the entrance as the primary navigation for ascent. Keep the faint glow in sight, find the exit tube. This reliance on ambient light was their first critical miscalculation. Effectiveness of the beam depended on time of day and surface weather. On an overcast day, or as the sun moved across the sky, the beam could go dim, become diffuse, or disappear entirely. From the far corners of the 140-meter chamber, the small entrance would be nearly impossible to spot. They didn't account for becoming disoriented in sheer blackness far from the beacon of daylight. Second major flaw: no continuous guideline from the surface. A guideline is a diver's lifeline. A tactile connection to the outside world can be followed by hand even in total siltout. They carried a reel meant for side passages, not the primary route. This choice reflected the era's cavalier attitude toward safety. They substituted a foolproof tool with their confidence a gamble in a place that punishes hubris. They underestimated compounding effects of depth narcosis and disorientation. 36 meters was deep enough for significant nitrogen narcosis to set in, impairing the judgment needed to execute their plan. They didn't appreciate how quickly cognition could degrade. Monitoring air levels becomes a challenge, remembering the way back becomes impossible. Their plan relied on best-case scenarios with no robust contingencies. They stepped off a cliff, confident they'd fly without realizing they had no wings. The entry to the shaft isn't a doorway, it's a decision. Feet first, one by one, the team slides into a 1-meter tube of limestone and shadow. Sound narrows to breath and bubbles. Rock presses close. There is no turning around. 7 meters down, the chimney opens, and the world falls away. Light from above blurs into a pale coin. The cave swallows the rest. They hover beneath the entrance, check signals, steady nerves. Then, commit. Off the ledge, into black water, 4 beams pushing a ceiling of night. From this point, the rules change. Air is math. Distance lies. Confidence is not a plan. They are inside the shaft now, past the last easy exit, descending toward consequences. Emerging, the world transformed. They left the passage and entered the staggering void of the main chamber, like stepping off a cliff into deep space. Below, the water was so clear they seemed suspended in air. Their dive lights cut through darkness. The beams struggled to find wall or floor, revealing the cavern's mind-boggling scale. They regrouped just below the entrance, treading in an immense, silent cathedral of rock and water, their bubbles the only sound. Here, just below the surface, they made their final decision. The plan: descend without a primary guideline. Rely on the column of light from the entrance to find the way back. Looking up, the opening was a brilliant, shimmering disk, a seemingly foolproof beacon. But that beacon would quickly shrink and dim, and could be lost if they strayed to the chamber's far edges. They trusted their eyes and their internal compass, foregoing the one tool that could guide them home by touch. With a shared signal, the team began their descent. 4 cohesive points of light moving down into blackness. Their initial path was vertical, aimed at the massive rock pile below. Air in their tanks compressed as pressure rose. They adjusted buoyancy, venting air to keep a steady, controlled drop. At this stage, everything seemed to be going to plan. They descended into the heart of one of Australia's most spectacular underwater landmarks, unaware their simple plan was already beginning to unravel. The journey downward into the shaft's main chamber is a slow-motion fall through inner space. As the 4 divers descended, the bright circle of the entrance above them shrank with every meter. A brilliant gateway at 10 meters, a distant star at 20, a faint ghostly glow at 30. Their world was defined by the intersecting beams of their dive lights. Those beams illuminated a swirling galaxy of tiny suspended particles. The rock walls remained tantalizingly out of reach. No sense of speed or position. It was profoundly disorienting. Up and down the only reliable directions. Passing the 30-meter mark, the floor began to materialize below them. Not a flat sandy bottom, but a colossal, chaotic mound of boulders and rubble. The remnants of the ancient ceiling collapsed that created the sinkhole. The rock pile rose up from the depths, a rugged alien landscape. Their plan reached that feature at about 36 meters, 120 feet, as their primary reference. From there, swim a circuit around the base, explore the perimeter, then begin ascent. The rock pile was the destination, the turning point of their dive. But the environment posed a hidden threat: silt. The rocks and floor were coated in a fine, powdery layer of clay and decomposed organic matter, a single, careless fin kick, the downward thrust of a hand used for stabilization, even the powerful exhaust from their regulators. Once disturbed, the silt would billow into an impenetrable milky cloud, visibility from 30 meters to 0 in seconds. As the team reached the rock pile, they would have been acutely aware of this danger. Experienced divers use precise buoyancy control and gentle, modified kicking techniques to avoid stirring up the bottom. But at this depth, another factor was beginning to take hold: the increased partial pressure of nitrogen. It was starting to affect their central nervous systems. Coordination slightly off, thought processes a little slower. Fine motor control needed to navigate a silty environment was already becoming compromised. So that was where things were heading. Upon reaching the rock pile at the bottom of the main chamber, the divers were presented with a choice. Their original plan was to explore the perimeter at this level, a depth of roughly 36 meters. This was already a deep dive by the standards of the day. But from the edges of the rock pile, tempting, darker openings beckoned. These were entrances to deeper tunnels, passages that led down into the unexplored abyss. For explorers like Stephen Millett, the promise of seeing something no one had ever seen was powerful. It appears the team deviated from their plan. Instead of staying in the relative safety of the main chamber, at least 2 divers, Stephen Millett and John Bockerman, decided to venture deeper. They swam away from the rock pile into a descending tunnel. The decision dramatically increased the risk. They entered a confined overhead environment. They were plunging beyond their intended limit. Every meter down increased their air consumption. It intensified nitrogen narcosis. 2 divers, Christine Millott and Gordon Roberts, stayed near the top of the rock pile. The team was now split. That separation was a critical failure in protocol. A fundamental rule is to stay together as a team. By separating, they lost the ability to monitor each other's gas supply and location. They were 4 individuals instead of one supportive unit. As Millot and Bockerman pushed deeper, they chased a deadly siren's call. The tunnel sloped down steeply. Depth climbed fast. At depths approaching 60 meters and beyond, severe nitrogen narcosis would set in. Perception of time distorted. Clear, rational thought compromised. They kept consuming gas at an alarming rate, while their minds lured them ever deeper into the earth. The first tangible sign that something had gone terribly wrong was likely a sudden and catastrophic loss of visibility. Inside the tunnel were Stephen Millot and John Bockerman. As they began their ascent through the deep tunnel, their movements and the powerful exhaust bubbles from their regulators would have dislodged decades of accumulated silt from the ceiling and floor. The fine sediment would have instantly exploded into a blinding cloud, engulfing them in a thick brownout. One moment they were in clear water, the next they were in a dark, suffocating fog, unable to see their own hands, unable to see their gauges or each other. They were now blind and lost in a maze. In a zero-visibility silt-out, a cave diver's only hope is a continuous guideline leading to the exit. Without one, panic is almost inevitable. Disoriented and with their judgment already severely impaired by narcosis, Millot and Bockerman would have struggled to find their way back to the main chamber. Every frantic movement only made the silt-out worse. They were burning through their remaining air supply at an accelerated rate, their bodies fueled by adrenaline and fear. The precious minutes they had left were ticking away with terrifying speed as they fought against the blinding, choking darkness. Back in the main chamber, Christine Millot and Gordon Roberts would have seen the billowing cloud of silt pouring out of the tunnel entrance. This was a clear and horrifying signal of distress. They knew their partners were in that tunnel. Their immediate instinct might have been to help, but the situation was perilous. Entering a silt-out to find a lost diver is one of the most dangerous actions in cave diving, often leading to more fatalities. They were faced with an impossible choice: attempt a risky rescue with their own air supplies running low, or ascend to safety and leave their friends behind. As the silt cloud spread, it began to contaminate visibility in the entire lower section of the main chamber. The faint light from the surface, their only landmark, would have been completely obscured. Now all 4 divers were in jeopardy. Christine and Gordon, waiting in the increasingly murky water, were also at risk of becoming disoriented. The path back to the entrance tube, which had seemed so obvious on the way down, was now lost in the spreading gloom. The chain reaction had begun. A single misstep, disturbing the silt, had triggered a cascade of failures that was rapidly closing off every possible route of escape. As their air gauges dipped into the red and then fell to 0, the final moments for the divers would have been terrifying. The official cause of death for all 4 was drowning, a simple and stark conclusion to a complex series of events. This means they ran out of breathable air while still deep underwater, with no chance of reaching the surface. For Stephen Millot, for John Bockerman, both were deeper and likely ran out of air first, their end coming within the dark, silty confines of the cave system. The last sensation would have been the desperate, useless effort to draw a breath from an empty tank, followed by the body's involuntary, agonizing reflex to breathe water. The evidence suggests that the divers did not all perish in the same location, indicating a scattered and frantic final struggle. John Bockerman had pushed the deepest and was found far from the others. He may have become completely lost in the deeper tunnel system. Stephen Millot was found much shallower. He likely escaped the initial silt-out and swam upwards, fighting, but his air was exhausted before he reached the surface. His final moments were a race against time that he tragically lost. For Christine Millot, for Gordon Roberts, both had been waiting in the main chamber and faced an equally grim fate. Evidence suggests they stayed together until the very end. They likely searched for the exit in the murky water until their own air was depleted. Their final moments were together, not solitary, in the silent, cold darkness of the chamber. The psychological impact of nitrogen narcosis cannot be overstated. It impairs judgment and can create a strange detachment or confusion. Some survivors describe puzzlement rather than outright panic, a dreamlike state where urgency doesn't fully register. We cannot know their thoughts, but it's likely their minds were not their own. They were victims not just of the cave and a lack of air, but of the profound, deadly treachery of the deep. Back at the entrance to the shaft, the mood among the remaining members shifted slowly from patient anticipation to a gnawing anxiety. They had watched their 4 friends descend with excitement, fully expecting them to surface within the planned dive time around 30 to 40 minutes. As the 1-hour mark came and went, conversations dwindled. All eyes were fixed on the small, dark pool of water in the center of the entrance tube. They watched for the telltale sign of ascending divers, the shimmering disturbance of exhaled bubbles breaking the surface. But the water remained unnervingly still. The silence from below was absolute and deeply unsettling. As more time passed, the grim reality began to dawn on them. A delay of a few minutes could be explained by an interesting discovery or a minor equipment issue. A delay of over an hour for 4 divers on single tanks could mean only one thing. They were in trouble. The support divers on the surface were experienced enough to know the harsh mathematics of air consumption at depth. They knew that the team's air supply would have been long gone. A sense of helplessness descended upon the group. They were standing just meters away from their friends, separated by a vertical wall of water and rock, completely powerless to help. The recovery operation began almost immediately, drawing in some of the most experienced cave divers in Australia. The divers descended into the gloomy silence of the shaft, their powerful lights cutting through the water, searching for any sign of their missing colleagues. The first discovery was made relatively quickly and at a surprisingly shallow depth. The body of Stephen L. Millett was found at a depth of approximately 15 meters, around 50 feet. He was located under a large sloping rock ledge, not far from the direct ascent line to the entrance. This location told a heartbreaking story. It confirmed that Stephen had managed to escape the deeper parts of the cave and was on his way to the surface. He was agonizingly close to safety, just a few minutes swim from the air, but his tank was empty. He had run out of time and air, and his body had come to rest under the overhang during its final, uncontrolled descent after he drowned. This initial finding provided a crucial piece of the puzzle, but it also deepened the mystery of the other 3 divers. Stephen's shallow location suggested a frantic and desperate final ascent, but the whereabouts of his wife, his friend Gordon Roberts, and John Bockerman remained unknown. The recovery team continued their search, meticulously sweeping the vast chamber with their lights. The scale of the cavern made the task incredibly difficult. It was like searching a football field at night with only a flashlight. The divers had to be methodical, moving in careful patterns to ensure no area was missed, all while managing their own gas supplies and depth. The subsequent dives on that first day yielded no further results. The silt that had been kicked up during the incident had settled to some degree, but the water in the lower sections of the chamber remained murky, hampering the search efforts. The recovery divers returned to the surface with the grim news that only one of the victims had been located. It was clear that this was going to be a prolonged and highly complex operation. The remaining 3 divers were somewhere in the immense dark void below. Finding them would require a series of dives, deep, dangerous, emotionally draining, into the heart of the killer cave. The tragedy at the shaft sent a powerful shockwave through the global diving community, but its impact was most profoundly felt in Australia. The loss of 4 divers in a single incident was a brutal wake-up call, forcing a painful and long overdue reckoning with the sport's cavalier attitude towards safety. The pioneering era of trial and error was over, its devastating cost laid bare. In September 1973, just 4 months after the accident, the Cave Divers Association of Australia, the CDAA, was formed. The organization was founded by a group of senior divers, including many who were involved in the recovery efforts at the shaft. Their mission was clear: to prevent a similar tragedy from ever happening again. The CDAA introduced several key safety principles that are now considered fundamental to modern cave diving. The foremost of these was the non-negotiable rule of using a continuous guideline. They also formalized the rule of thirds for gas management and a rigorous, tiered training system. The association also took on the role of managing access to the sensitive cave sites. The formation of the CDAA marked a fundamental shift in the culture of Australian cave diving, moving from a focus on bravado and depth to a new ethos centered on discipline, training, knowledge, and an unwavering respect for the unforgiving nature of the underwater cave environment. The tragic events of May 28, 1973, cast a long and dark shadow over the world of cave diving. But from that darkness, a powerful light of change emerged. The deaths of Stephen Millott, Christine Millott, Gordon Roberts, and John Bockerman were not just a grim statistic. They became a foundational moment. Their story served as a brutal and undeniable lesson written in the cold, silent depths of the shaft. It forced a generation of divers to confront the lethal gap between their ambitions and their capabilities, highlighting the catastrophic consequences of inadequate training, flawed planning, and an over-reliance on confidence instead of proven safety protocols. The loss was immense, but the legacy it created has been profoundly life-saving. The principles it established, the mandatory use of a continuous guideline, the strict adherence to gas management rules like the rule of thirds, and a rigorous tiered training system, have become the bedrock of safe cave diving worldwide. These rules were not arbitrary. Each one was a direct response to a specific failure that occurred inside the shaft, making them a living memorial to the 4 divers who perished. The allure of places like the shaft remains as potent as ever. The silent, weightless flight through a subterranean cathedral of crystal-clear water, lit by the ethereal beam of a diver's light, is an experience that transcends simple sport. It is a journey into a geological time capsule, a world of profound and ancient beauty that reminds us how much of our own planet remains a mystery. The memory of Stephen, Christine, Gordon, and John endures as both a tribute and a solemn warning. By learning from their tragedy, we honor their adventurous spirit. We ensure that those who follow them into the darkness do so with the wisdom and the tools needed to return safely to the light, carrying with them new stories and new knowledge from the last truly uncharted places on Earth. Love real survival and exploration? Subscribe now. Never miss a story.
In the rugged heart of Appalachia, there are stories etched deep into the land. They are tales of hard work, of family, and of a quiet courage that few will ever know. The hills of West Virginia hold these stories close. They are whispered on the wind that rustles through the ancient trees. For generations, the people here have gone down into the darkness. They have ventured into the earth itself to bring back the fuel that powered a nation. This is a story about one of those places, a place called the Sago Mine. It is a story of a single day that would change everything. A day that would test the limits of hope and the strength of the human spirit. The Sago Mine lies in Upshur County, West Virginia. It is an underground coal mine, a sprawling network of tunnels burrowed deep beneath the rolling hills. Like so many mines in the region, it was the lifeblood of the community. It provided jobs, it supported families, it was a source of pride, a difficult but honest way to make a living. The mine was operated by the International Coal Group, or ICG. They were a company that knew the business of coal, they knew the risks, and they knew the rewards. But on a cold January 2nd, 2006, the inherent dangers of this work would make themselves known in the most devastating way imaginable. To understand what happened at Sago, you must first understand the world of the coal miner. It is a world apart. You leave the sunlight behind, you descend into a place of constant darkness. A place where the air you breathe is carefully managed by powerful fans. The walls around you are solid rock and coal, holding back the immense weight of the mountain above. The work is physically demanding, a constant battle against the elements and the earth. Every day is a calculated risk. Miners learn to trust their training, their equipment, and most of all, the men working alongside them in the deep. For the men who worked the Sago mine, this was their reality. They were fathers, sons, husbands. They were neighbors, friends. They knew the mine's every twist and turn, its familiar sounds and silences. They understood the language of the mountain, the creaks and groans that signaled its immense power. They were professionals, highly skilled in their craft. They faced the darkness daily so that the world above could have light and warmth. But the mountain is unforgiving. It keeps its own secrets. And on January 2nd, 2006, one of those secrets would be unleashed with terrifying force plunging the community and the nation into a desperate vigil. The year was 2006. The day was January 2nd. A bitter cold had settled over West Virginia. The holiday season was just ending. A time of warmth, family gatherings. But for the miners scheduled for the morning shift at Sargo, the day began like any other. They woke before the sun, pulling on layers of work clothes to guard against the winter chill. The world outside was still and quiet, cloaked in the pre-dawn darkness. The air was crisp and cold. It was a Monday, the start of a new work week. As the first shift of miners arrived, the Sargo mine complex was a small island of light and activity. Headlamps cut through the darkness as men gathered, sharing a cup of coffee, a few words before their descent. The temperature hovered near freezing. The ground was hard, and the breath of the miners plumed in the cold air. There was nothing to suggest this day would be different, nothing to warn them of the catastrophe that was brewing deep within the earth. It was simply a cold winter morning, a day for hard work in the heart of coal country. Around 50 to 60 men typically worked each shift at the Sargo mine. They would travel deep underground, some more than 2 miles from the entrance. Their world was a labyrinth of man-made caverns and tunnels, supported by timber, steel. This particular morning, the first shift was preparing to relieve the night crew and begin their day's work. They were a team. They relied on each other for their safety and their lives. The bond between miners is forged in the shared experience of working in one of the world's most dangerous environments. The time was approaching 6:30 a.m. The sun had not yet risen over the Appalachian peaks. Deep inside the Sargo mine, 13 men were working in the second left section of the mine. They were far from the surface, deep within the mountain's embrace, preparing the equipment, checking their gear, getting ready to extract the coal. Above ground, the world was slowly waking up. But below, in the silent black corridors of the mine, a hidden danger was gathering. A volatile mixture of methane gas, a constant and deadly threat in coal mining, was reaching a critical point. The 13 men trapped in the darkness were not just numbers. They were individuals, each with a life, a family, and a story. They spanned decades, 20s to 60s, youthful grit beside seasoned wisdom. Some were seasoned veterans with decades of experience underground. Others were younger, following in the footsteps of their fathers and their grandfathers. They were men like Terry Helms, a foreman known for his steady hand and experience. They were men like Marty Bennett, a father who coached his son's Little League team. They were the heart and soul of their small West Virginia communities. Among them were friends and relatives who worked side by side. Deep within the earth, in places untouched by sunlight for millions of years, the process of forming coal also creates methane. This colorless, odorless gas is a miner's constant, invisible enemy. It seeps from the coal seams and surrounding rock, slowly filling any unventilated space. At the Sargo mine, a section of the mine had been sealed off in 2005. It was an area that was no longer being actively mined. The standard procedure is to erect substantial seals, concrete walls designed to isolate these abandoned areas and contain the hazardous gases that inevitably accumulate within them. Behind these walls, the methane concentration can build to dangerously explosive levels, waiting silently for a way to escape. The exact cause of the ignition, the spark that lit the fuse at Sargo, remains a subject of debate among investigators. But in the volatile environment of a coal mine, potential ignition sources are everywhere. It could have been an electrical arc from a piece of mining equipment. It could have been the friction of metal against rock, creating a shower of sparks. It could have been static electricity. The Mine Safety and Health Administration, or MSHA, later concluded that the most likely culprit was a lightning strike. The powerful electrical charge from the storm raging on the surface could have traveled through the ground, following the rock strata until it found a path to ignite the waiting methane cloud. At approximately 6:26 a.m., the invisible cloud of methane gas found its ignition source. The result was instantaneous and cataclysmic. In less than a second, the gas mixture exploded. The energy released was immense, a violent, uncontrolled detonation that ripped through the confined space of the mine tunnels. For the 13 men working deeper in the mine, the first sign of trouble was not a sound, but a feeling. A sudden, violent change in air pressure, a concussion that slammed into them with the force of a physical blow. The lights, powered by the mine's electrical grid, would have flickered and died, plunging them into absolute terrifying blackness. Their world, which seconds before had been one of familiar routine and industrial noise, was instantly transformed into a chaotic, disorienting hell. The explosion had happened. The mountain had spoken with a voice of pure violence, and the fight for their lives had just begun. Immediately following the pressure wave came the fire. The explosion's heat created a rolling fireball surging through the tunnels, consuming methane and oxygen in its path. This inferno incinerated everything it touched. Rubber conveyor belts ignited, hydraulic fluid ignited, the coal itself ignited, adding more fuel and creating thick, toxic smoke. The explosion pulverized coal in the ribs and pillars, kicking up an enormous amount of fine black dust. Coal dust is highly flammable. The initial methane blast aerosolized it, creating a secondary fuel source. As the fireball passed, it was followed by a thick, impenetrable cloud of smoke and dust. It was a toxic cocktail. Burning coal, plastics, and rubber released a deadly mixture of gases, chief among them carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide, odorless, colorless, and lethal. It binds to hemoglobin 200 times more effectively than oxygen. Even a small concentration can quickly lead to asphyxiation. The miners were now breathing this poisoned atmosphere. The dust and smoke created a condition of zero visibility. Even powerful cap lamps could not penetrate the thick black soup. The miners were rendered blind, unable to see their own hands in front of their faces. In the violent chaos of the explosion, the mine's lifelines to the outside world were severed. The primary mode of communication in a mine is the hardwired phone system, known as the mine phone. The force of the blast and the subsequent fire destroyed the cables that connected these phones. The line went dead, replaced by an unnerving and absolute silence. Above ground, the crew in the mine office would have seen the power to the mine's ventilation fans and electrical systems suddenly trip. These are immediate, unmistakable signs of a major disaster. Their first instinct, ingrained through years of safety drills, would have been to activate their self-contained self-rescuers. This is a device every miner carries on their belt. It's a small canister that, when activated, provides about 1 hour of breathable oxygen by chemically scrubbing the carbon monoxide from the user's exhaled breath. The device does not supply oxygen from a tank. It uses potassium superoxide to scrub exhaled air, removing carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, and in the process chemically produces oxygen. The reaction generates significant heat, making the canister hot to the touch. The air it provides is warm and dry, a strange comfort in the sudden, terrifying cold of the powerless mine. With the precious 1 hour clock of their rescuers ticking, they had to make a decision. Their training presented them with two primary options: escape or barricade. But the path back to the surface was now a landscape of destruction, blocked by debris, with fire and with deadly concentrations of toxic gas. The second option, barricade. Find a defensible spot and seal it off from contaminated air to make a makeshift airlock. The goal, a sealed chamber with clean air to sustain them until rescuers arrived. Ultimately, 13 men, led by experienced leaders, made the hard choice. The path out was too dangerous, too unknown. They would make their stand. Having made the decision to barricade, the next critical task was to find a suitable location. They needed a place that was structurally sound, away from the immediate path of the explosion's force. Debris littered their path, turning familiar tunnels into a hazardous obstacle course. The miners, relying on their intimate mental map of the second left section, began to move deeper into the mine, away from the explosion's source. It was their best hope of finding a place where the air might be cleaner. Their search led them approximately 260 feet from their working face, to a location designated as the number 1 entry. Here, they found what they were looking for. The men began their work with a desperate urgency. This cloth, designed to be airtight, would be the primary component of their seal. The construction was a feat of improvisation. Across this frame, They stretched the heavy Breathless cloth, pulling it as taut as they could. They used mud from the mine floor, fine coal dust, mixing it into a thick paste to plaster the edges of the cloth, filling every crack and seam they could find. They built 2 such walls. As they worked, they would have been acutely aware of the time. Some of their self-rescuers would have already expired, forcing them to share, a dangerous practice known as skip breathing. Finally, the barricade was complete. The last flap of cloth was sealed, plunging the 13 men into a different kind of darkness. Inside the sealed chamber, a new and terrible phase began, the waiting, a profound and heavy silence, conserving their energy, conserving their cap lamp batteries, conserving the precious air in their enclosure. As they breathed, they consumed oxygen and exhaled carbon dioxide. Without ventilation, CO2 would gradually rise. They were in a race against their own biology. They would have talked to each other, voices low. Moments of connection were a vital defense against despair. As the hours inside the barricade stretched on, the miners knew their time was running out. In these final, lucid moments, their thoughts turned to their families. These were not letters of despair, but of love, a last testament from deep within the earth. Randall McCloy Jr., the youngest of the crew, was designated to write a collective note on behalf of the group. The note captured the final thoughts of the trapped men. The note read, in part, "Tell all I'll see them on the other side." It wasn't our fault. We had no bad air. The final line was a simple, heartbreaking declaration. We love you. This act of writing was a profound expression of their humanity in the face of death. They wanted their families to know they were together, that they were not alone, and that their final thoughts were of them. Below, 13 men wait behind Breathless cloth. Above, a silence snaps, power fails, gauges fall dark. The alarms tell a story the men cannot. Something violent has severed the mine's lifelines. Within minutes, state and federal teams are alerted. Training turns into motion. Mine rescue crews mobilize across the region. Volunteers stand ready to risk their lives. Families converge on Sago Baptist Church, hope in their hands, fear on their faces. The town becomes a waiting room. As the sun lifts, the portal turns into a staging ground for a complex, dangerous operation. Coordination is everything. State, federal, and company teams pool skills and gear to meet the threat. The rescuers are the tip of the spear, rotating in shifts with backup teams always ready. A remote rover goes first, the electronic canary sent to see what people cannot. Its mission is simple and vital. Eyes on the shattered entries, a path for the men behind it. The feed confirms the invisible enemy, lethal carbon monoxide, dangerous methane. Atmosphere now rules the clock. Cables snare the robot. From here on, only people can carry the search forward. Human teams advance, agonizingly slow, measuring each foot against gas and fire. They clear rock, shore the roof, rebuild stoppings, and push fresh air deeper, inch by inch toward second left. Invisible gases dictate every move. If methane spikes, they retreat and wait for air to turn. On the surface, hours feel like years. Frustration and dread settle in with the cold. A second front opens on the surface, drilled to intersect the tunnel where the men may be sealed. Crews aim a narrow borehole nearly half a mile down. Precision is everything. A drift of only a few feet could miss the void entirely, and the men waiting behind cloth. Breakthrough. The camera sees debris and hears only silence. The men are elsewhere. Hope bends, but does not break. While a town prays, teams reset and go back under, toward second left, toward the cloth wall. What waits beyond it will lift a nation, or break it. The breach is next. After more than 40 hours of relentless back-breaking work, the rescue teams underground were finally nearing their objective. At approximately 11:45 p.m., on the night of January 3rd, a rescue team finally breached the area. They saw the makeshift barricade the miners had constructed from Breathless cloth. The rescuers began to carefully cut their way through the seal, their hearts pounding. Behind that fragile wall lay the answer to the question the whole world was asking. Were they alive? As the rescuers entered the sealed chamber, their lights swept across a scene of stillness. They found the 13 miners lying motionless. The air inside the barricade was thick with carbon monoxide. But then, they found one. One of the men, Randall McCloy Jr., showed faint signs of life. He was breathing. He was alive. As rescue teams reached the barricaded miners deep underground, a fatal miscommunication occurred. The initial report suggested the miraculous, that 12 of the 13 miners had been found alive. He announced that 12 men were alive. The church erupted in a wave of pure, unadulterated joy. Church bells began to ring across the small West Virginia community. National media broadcast the news instantly. For a brief moment, the nation celebrated a miracle. But deep inside the mind, the reality was starkly different. The communication breakdown created a surreal disconnect between the grim scene underground and the jubilant surface celebration. Then, at approximately 3 a.m., CEO Ben Hatfield arrived at the church. He had the terrible task of correcting the record. He stood before the families and told them the truth. There was only one survivor. 12 men were dead. Joy turned to screams of anguish and disbelief. The corrected news fell like a physical blow upon the small community of Sago. The town, and indeed the entire state of West Virginia, was united in grief. In the wake of the funerals and the raw public grieving, the hard questions began. The U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration and the West Virginia Office of Miners' Health, Safety and Training launched a full-scale investigation into the causes of the disaster. Investigators descended upon the Sago mine, and the grim task of re-entering the damaged sections to search for physical evidence. The Sago mine had a history of safety violations, including citations for inadequate ventilation and the accumulation of dangerous gases. Public hearings were held where officials from International Coal Group were called to testify. The families of the lost miners and the public demanded answers. The final MSHA report concluded that the explosion was caused by a massive methane leak from a recently sealed-off area, and that a lightning strike on the surface was the likely culprit. The disaster was not simply a tragic accident, but the result of a cascade of failures. International Coal Group, the operator of the mine, came under intense public scrutiny and faced significant consequences. The company was hit with substantial fines for the safety violations that contributed to the disaster. The Sago tragedy exposed weaknesses, not just within a single company, but within the broader system designed to protect the nation's miners. The Sago mine disaster left deep and lasting scars. To honor the men who died, permanent memorials were erected. Near the site of the mine, a black granite monument was built, engraved with the names of the 12 miners who perished. Each year, on the anniversary of the explosion, the community gathers for a candlelight vigil to remember the men. The handwritten notes left by the miners provided a poignant, human face to the tragedy. In response to the public outcry, the United States Congress moved with uncharacteristic speed. It was called the Mine Improvement and New Emergency Response Act, or the Miner Act, a legacy written in law. The law also required mining companies to install or upgrade refuge chambers. It mandated that all mines develop and maintain caches of emergency breathing devices. The Miner Act required companies to install wireless communication and electronic tracking systems. It mandated that every underground mine have at least 2 certified rescue teams available within 1 hour's travel time. The legislative changes spurred by the Miner Act were translated into a new generation of safety technology and procedures on the ground. Miners also carry personal emergency devices, or PEDs, which can receive text messages from the surface. It pierces the isolation that the Sago miners endured. The echo of that January explosion is now part of the American industrial landscape, a low, constant hum that whispers one message: never forget. The 13 men who went into the mine on January 2, 2006 could not have known the legacy they'd leave. Subscribe for more true exploration and disaster stories.